So, as Shelby said, we are Dream Team, and my name is Helena.
I'm Sigrid.
I'm Paloma.
I'm August.
And we're really excited to be talking to you today. But before we start, I just have a question. Does anyone here eat food? Could you just raise a hand if you eat food?
Yeah.
Wow, guys, everyone here eats food. That's really convenient, because then this presentation is going to be pretty relevant for all of you. Yeah. I just have one more question before we start. Can any of you remember the last thing you ate that was produced in Ås? If you can, just shout out what it was.
Strawberries.
Wow. Yeah, wow. Very cool. How about you guys?
Salad from Aalstad.
Wow.
I ate oats from Bua, the shop on campus.
Ah.
I had some potatoes, yeah.
Wow. Well, I have to admit that I actually don't know. I don't even know if I've ever eaten anything that was locally produced in Ås, which I think is really odd. I mean, there's so many fields, and Ås has a really long history of agriculture. I mean, it was cultivated all the way back to the Bronze Age. I mean, and then after the municipality was built, the NMBU came and they built the train tracks, and the train started importing food. You know, we started building all these houses, and even this house is placed where there used to be grown food. Which, you know, I will be honest, I think it's a little bit sad, because in Norway we only have 3% of our land suitable for agriculture. And out of those 3%, only 1/3, meaning 1%, is suitable for growing food for human consumption. And Ås is part of that 1%. Ås has some of the country's most rich, fertile, and valuable land. What are we doing with it?
Well, that's a great question. So we figured out that most of what is being produced in Ås is actually grains, and these grains are not they're not for human consumption, they're actually for animal consumption, and they're being mostly exported to the West Coast to feed livestock. And this is part of a larger trend in Norway. In fact, 80% of the grain that's produced in Norway goes to animal feed. So when Norway is using so much of its land to grow food for animals, then we have to import most of our food for humans. So over 60% of the food we eat in Norway is imported, with up to 94% of our fruits and berries being imported, over half of our vegetables, and most of our grains for human consumption being imported. And this leads to our grocery stores like Rema 1000 having produce shelves with food from countries all over the world. And today, this is currently where most people in Ås are getting their food.
Which is okay. It's because getting food there is easy, it's accessible, and it's year round.
Microphone.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah. Which is okay because, again, it's easy to get food from there, it's accessible, and it's year-round. So why buy local food? Well, we think there are many reasons to buy local food and to eat local food. And here are some of them. I think, Paloma, if you pull a bit back. Sorry. There we go. Yeah, so of course, buying locally means shorter supply chains, means less transportation, as well as less food getting lost along the way, all leading to lower greenhouse gas emissions, better for the environment. And a lot of our emissions actually come from transportation. I think this is I don't know how much you see, but this is like where the emissions zoom in. The emissions in, is it Akershus, comes from, and the blue part of the stacks, that is the transportation. So reducing transportation obviously could do a lot for the environment in that sense. Shorter supply chains also means more transparency. You get closer to the producer, which enables you to maybe establish a more relation to the producer, a relationship of trust, increasing the social connectivity locally. Also when you buy locally, just 1 second. When you buy locally, you increase the local trade, which also increases the social connectivity, as well as keeping more money and resource circulating locally. It strengthens the local economy, as well as increasing social connectivity, all leading to increased resilience in Ås. Anyways, and the last little part, sorry, less transportation. No, go back, sorry. Less transportation means obviously fresher foods, which is tastier, more nutritious, leads to a better health and a more happier you. So many good reasons to eat locally. So whether you care about, oh, who is this? Whether you care about your personal sustainability, your health, your well-being, your life quality, or whether you care about social sustainability, like community, cultural heritage, farmers' rights, even animals, or whether you care about the environment and the future of our planet, local food got your back. So, with all these good reasons to eat local, we came up with our problematique for this course, which is how can we make eating local in Ås more easy for people, more attractive and desirable for people, and more understandable.
So one of the first things we did to map out the current situation was to make a survey. And although it's not representative of us, we got 549 responses, so we think that's pretty okay. And over 60% of the people in Ås feel like they don't know enough or want to know more about where their food is coming from. We also found out that price, quality, and health is the main concern for people when they buy food in that order. Still, however, over 50% of the people in Ås are willing to pay more for local food or Norwegian produced food and better paid farmers. So we think there's a lot of potential here. And while some people are buying food locally, we don't really know to what degree, but sometimes there's majorly a great demand among all of our responders for better access to local food.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so we began by looking at all the places where people currently buy food in Ås. And this includes from the producers directly, from retailers like Rema and Kiwi, from private businesses like cafes and restaurants in Ås, and public institutions like canteens. Yeah. And then we kind of emphasized and did a deeper dive into some that we find that have a lot of potential because they either currently sell local food or they serve a lot of food to a lot of people. And if they incorporated more local food into their menus, then they could have a great impact. And when we found, after talking to all our stakeholders, is that many of these different people have the desire to sell local food, but there are various barriers to this.
Yes, so why doesn't Ås look more like this in the desired future? Because we have people who wants to buy more local food, and you have producers and retailers who want to sell more local food. What is this missing connection? Yes.
Well, okay. So we reimagined the iceberg to be a soilberg. And you can take a closer look at it on the maps in the back later, because I'm not going to zoom into every point now. But yeah, we started mapping out the different reasons why people are not consuming local food, focusing both on why individuals aren't buying local ingredients for cooking and eating at home, and also why Horeca, so hotels, restaurants, catering services, are not sourcing their ingredients from local producers. And so some of the ones that I'm going to highlight now, some of the leverage points, include marginal locations of existing food assets in Ås. So they're scattered all around. People don't know about them. They're on campus. They're out of Centrum. They all have different opening hours, different opening days. Another thing is the fact that there's actually very little food on the market right now. There's very little food for human consumption being produced in Ås, like Helena mentioned. Most of it is grain because that's what's profitable and convenient. But for those that are producing food for human consumption now, there's also the issue of lack of certification, standardization, and packaging of products that's related to a broader issue with the lack of supply chain infrastructure for local producers. We also looked at consumer mentalities, so related to the desire for food acquisition, preparation, and consumption to be convenient and quick and efficient, because food is kind of seen as a chore. And also the understanding of food as kind of just fuel instead of as culture or of medicine or storytelling.
Yeah, so after discovering some of the leverage points of the system, we started to come up with different potential interventions we could do in order to address them, our design solutions. Some of them had to do with the supply chain infrastructure. Some of them had to do with actually making what is here, the food assets, more visible and more known to people. Some of the interventions had to do with coordinating students to put pressure on the university or on CEOs in order to serve more local food. And some of them had to do with like just making local food more accessible, like having pop-up stands or local farmers markets, etc. Anyways, coming up with a lot of different interventions, and as Abel said, having limited resource, where should you put your energy and attention? So we tried to score the different interventions in a so-called impact threshold analysis, where you look at, so what is the threshold to actually get this through, and what is the potential impact that the intervention can have. Because you kind of want to pick the low-hanging fruits, that is the low threshold, that is also really tasty, which is the big impact. Anyways, so having scored a lot of different interventions, we tried to graph them on kind of an axis of, let's see here, on how low of a threshold and how high of the impact. And then you see a couple of them made it down to the golden square, which is which is where you have a low enough threshold and a high enough impact that it's like something worth beginning with. And came up with like our 3 winning solutions.
Yeah, and although our winning ideas are quite far away from our desired future, we hope that they can be one step in the right direction while using what we have right now. And first of all, we think that student organizations could coordinate themselves to pressure NMBU to practice what they're preaching and to prioritize local food. Because NMBU owns a lot of land and they have lots of passionate students, and they claim that students have a lot of to say and have a lot of influence. So if that's true, we think there's a lot of potential there to make both local food canteens and local food gardens and more integrated local foods in the course themselves. We also believe that we can have multifunctional pop-up shops right out here, because as in 2021, it's free to have food stalls here for local farmers. And we're hoping that maybe it would be possible to make something that's semi-permanent, so farmers don't have to deal with all the organization of packing up and down and electricity and everything, but a little cart with this tiny kitchen and like shelves where you can just come up, put up your stuff, and at the end of the day, you can leave to the next person. The third idea is to enhance visibility and the knowledge of the assets that's already here and in place by making local news food letters for where is it, what's happening, mapping it up on a map, where in Aalstad can you get local food, and put up signs to be like, this is where it's happening, this is where it's happening, this is where it's happening, and also to make clear entrance points to make it more inviting for people to be like, wow, what is this? I want to check it out. Let's go and see.
And with these initial winning ideas, I'm going to tell you a story. I want you all to imagine that a student group, they came to Ås and they had a presentation about local food. And in the room, there were an audience of people, farmers, and retailers, and they thought to themselves, wow, what a presentation. Let me take these ideas with me and do something about them. So Årungen, which is a group of farmers, and other farmers, they came together into collaboration, and they ended up creating these wonderful streets, going into the supermarkets, having these local food shelves. And students as well, they thought, yeah, let's go do something about this. And then they organize themselves and they think, we need cheaper living and we also want to contribute to local food. So let's make a tiny house village. And then Bua, for instance, which is this currently selling local food, became this cool collaborative initiative with NMBU as well on the board. So I want to ask you all, how could Ås look like with local food? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Great job. So proud. Okay, very nice work. So now this part is a Q&A for, we've got about 10-ish minutes. Really solid job. So the floor is now open. So what we'll do is if you have a question or like maybe you want to see like something on their map more closely, anything at all, okay? You go ahead. This is for you all to actually engage with their work basically, okay? So take a moment. And then once you're ready, just put your finger up or something and I'll, go ahead, Abel. Well, I was thinking for COVID, I'll just repeat the question, I think. So go ahead.
You want this?
Yeah, we can put the,
I think it's a catch box.
well, here, you might cut it. It's okay.
Does this work on Zoom though?
It's on Zoom, yeah.
All right. Yeah, so in Ås, there's actually a lot of empty business spaces all around Centrum. You talked about scattered locations of all these different food initiatives. What do you think about, did you think about trying to cluster them? What would it?
I mean,
yeah.
we did talk a lot about that in our threshold analysis. However, we sort of measured it to be maybe harder to start with. That's why it didn't like come up to our winning ideas. But I think we have talked about, for example, trying to make a food hub in Centrum, where we can make community kitchens and where we can have cooking classes to bring people together to like learn how to use the things that are produced in Ås. We can have community dinners, we can have workshop, or we can make community gardens, for example, which would be really cool in these empty buildings. However, it's, yeah. Do anyone want to say more about that?
Could you also just show us quickly, maybe say a little bit about what you're actually scoring on, like dive into the impact and thresholds you were looking at?
The measurement we have though is a fun measurement. How fun is this idea? That's actually super important.
Yeah.
But more correct.
Yeah, it's just helpful for the audience who don't know about this impact and threshold analysis.
Again, impact threshold, threshold is like how much does it take to actually pull it through? And then we scored it on like the economic threshold, like how much financial support you need to get it through, all relatively speaking, of course, cultural barriers, technical barriers, and organizational barriers, like coordinating the people necessary to do the intervention. So that's kind of like the different thresholds. And say what you're proposing, able to kind of make a cluster of different food assets in center. Yeah, probably scored a bit higher on the threshold. It like takes a lot to coordinate and maybe needs way more economic funding in order to pull it through than, say, for example, making a newsletter or a map. However, it could have a very big impact to do something like that. So we definitely thought about it, and we still think it's a great thing to try to pull through. And yeah, here are some of the ways to score the impact of an intervention, like how big of an effect will it have. So you can look at the short-term impacts, long-term impacts, and the ripple effects. Like if you do something here, could it ripple out, say, outside of Ås, or outside outside in space and time, basically. And yeah, also looking at synergies, like if you do this intervention and this intervention together, may they have synergistic effects, like be more powerful together. Yeah, so that is just some of the ways we scored the thresholds and the impacts.
Yeah, let's pass the catch box to the next person.
Was it clear, by the way?
I think so.
Any other questions? Yeah, maybe you can give it just, I know, I'm like, are you guys? Yeah, exactly. Let's just leave it in the center and then I'll repeat, we can repeat the question in the microphone, I think, yeah. We're all, COVID just started, we don't know about it yet. We're figuring it out. Okay, yeah.
I was just wondering, while there are a lot of farms around here, a lot of the farms needs to be specialized and provide big volumes for it to be economical, sustainable. And for these local food things, it seems like you need to have a little of everything, and you can't really give out large volumes of stuff because no one can take such large volumes.
Okay, maybe.
You want to repeat?
Yeah, I will try repeating that question. Sylvie wanted to know, this is a tough one to repeat, but basically, many farms operate by outputting a lot of volume. That's how they're able to be economically profitable. But it seems that local food producers have to diversify, make a lot of many smaller options, right? So Sylvia is wondering if you talked about that and how we can get that to be economically viable.
Yeah, or it could like part it up a bit. Some go to local food for something, and then you can still sell the micro volumes to the larger companies.
Okay.
That can take it.
Yeah. So maybe having local producers still be able to have a high volume that they sell outside of the region, but are you know, putting some locally. It's a great idea. I'll leave you. Does anyone? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, like one of the main things we found was that you need, in order to survive as a local farmer, you have to collaborate in teams with other local farmers to be able to compete against the big chains. And this has worked out well. A lot of other places. This is what they do, for instance, in Copenhagen, I think, as well as in England, where, yeah, they come together, and that's how you also get the diversity. They can be niche, but when you have one food truck delivering a little bit from all of them to the people, then you get also the variation. Any other ideas?
There's also potential for community-supported agriculture, like Distegård down the road, which is just a section of Distegård, a much bigger farm. So there's potential for transforming just even smaller parcels of land into these more like rich, diversified growing spaces that are volunteer run or run by members to actually contribute all the labor that is needed to have diverse production like that. So I think the small steps towards increasing local production, just even taking small chunks of land or potentially also like the distribution network where there can be an easy way for producers to like put up what they're producing, because yeah, there might need to be like large volumes of food in order for producers to have contracts with like Horeca, for example. They need like large quantities, but if there's more collaboration, I think, between farmers with like, okay, I can bring in like this amount of strawberries, if you bring in this amount of strawberries, like maybe there's potential there to meet those demands, not all from one farmer or one farm.
And yeah, also with respects to Ås, like Ås is close to Oslo, which have which could be a potential kind of large consumer of local products. So there is potential for both keeping stuff circulating very locally, but also kind of exporting larger chunks to the nearby areas, like regionally. So there is some potential there as well. But like, yeah, stable, large demand would be beneficial. Yeah, Abel?
Why would it be good for Oslo to maybe get food from Ås?
Well, yeah, so the question is, why would it be beneficial for Oslo to get more locally produced food? From Ås in specifically? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, first of all, local food is super nutritious. Super nutritious. Because it doesn't take long from being in the ground to getting to your table. Yeah, I think that is one of the...
This is something that addresses the question as well. So when food is produced far away, or like the longer food have kind of a deterioration process, especially like fresh foods like fruits and veggies. So kind of the longer after they're harvested to they're eaten, like the more they deteriorate physically, chemically, and biologically. So it loses nutrients, which makes it less tasty and less nutritious, less healthy. So basically, why would Oslo want more local food from, say, Ås? It's fresher, tastes better, it's healthier, and it supports kind of regional economy. Yeah, sure.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and I think we went through a lot of the reasons why local food in general earlier.
And also, oh, you wanna?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Not a comment.
Okay.
Oh, you're gonna answer it?
Well, okay, I was just gonna say that now many people in Ås go to Oslo to go get some nice, fresh, cheap veggies at like the Asian delis or in Grönland. But what if we had food from Ås being sold at farmers markets in Oslo, and then people were like, what? Ås? Okay, that's a cool place to go get nice, fresh, delicious vegetables. I'm gonna go there on the weekend instead of people from Ås going out to Oslo on the weekend.
And both.
And both. Mutual exchange.
Time for one more.
One last
All
question.
right.
Yeah. Okay, should I go? So how do we incentivize the farmers around those? Because the main production focus is grain or to change their agricultural practices, so we see more vegetable production, food production, berry production, and diversified agricultural practices happening. How to incentivize them, and who can drive this process? As we know, NMBU had an effect, we'd already see that happening. So who will do this, or who could?
I'll repeat the question then. So the question is, how do we incentivize farmers around Ås who are currently just growing grains to change to a more diversified production of vegetables and fruits, and kind of who needs to like spearhead this incentivization?
Yeah. There was a comment on NMBU.
And a comment on NMBU. Sorry, can you repeat your comment on NMBU?
I was just saying, why is our university so hands-off from this transformational process? Because if NMBU would do what they preach, and we would already see that happening in our town.
Yes.
So if it isn't an NMBU, then who it is to spearhead this process?
Yes.
Because they grew differently on their land.
Yeah. Yes. So what is NMBU's kind of role in this with their kind of stake as someone who owns a lot of land and who could serve as a role model but isn't currently practicing what they preach?
Two things that we found was that we call them in Norwegian ildsjeler. It's like fire spirits. I don't know in English. You have to have fire spirits in order to get these initiatives going, because you have lots of administrative structures framing and constraining the NMBU from doing what it preaches. It's easy to tell, but it's easy to talk, but it's not easy to walk the talk. And another thing we also found was that inspiration, it's super helpful. Visualizing a green future maybe encourages people who maybe are not fire souls today, becomes fire souls tomorrow. So I think students have a crucial role in making NMBU, especially walking the talk. And I also think that showing from person to person that, yeah, like, look at my garden, it's super cool and inspirational. Don't you want this as well? Or, yeah, that is the two answers I have at least.
Okay, that was great. Yeah. Round of applause for these guys. Thank you. Yeah, great. We could leave it up on that, actually. So while we have a break, you can all look at this and discuss amongst yourselves how student organizations can put pressure. Yeah, zoom in on that. Put pressure on NMBU. Yeah, very good. Okay, awesome. We're gonna take a 10-minute break, okay? Thank you so much. Please get coffee and